Introducing the new Volvo XC90. With 7-seat versatility, Google built-in, and advanced safety features for all your precious cargo. The new Volvo XC90, designed for life. Visit volvocars.com/US to learn more.
On WhatsApp, no one can see or hear your personal messages. Whether it's a voice call, message, or sending a password. To WhatsApp, it's all just this. So whether you're sharing the streaming password in the family chat or trading those late-night voice messages that could basically become a podcast, your personal messages stay between you, your friends, and your family. No one else. Not even us. WhatsApp. Message privately with everyone.
When you wanna grow your list size, pop up like it's hot, pop up like it's hot, pop up like it's hot. And when you gotta boost your revenue, pop up like it's hot, hey, pop up like it's hot, pop up like it's hot. Pick your favorite template, you can tailor to your brand. They're MailChimp-erific, you're gonna be a fan. MailChimp your marketing with our new customizable pop-ups.
Hey everyone, this is Andrew Zink, the host of the Ghost of Tsushima Yotei Gamecast. I want to welcome you to the show and let you know that you can reach out to us via email or find us on Blue Sky. All of the links are in the show notes. You can join the Robots Radio Discord to chat with us directly, and you can listen to this podcast on any podcasting platform that you listen to. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show. Hello and welcome everyone to the second episode of the Ghost of Tsushima Gamecast. I'm your host, Andrew Zink. Super excited to welcome you to this second episode, which covers Act 1, the main storyline. So the main storyline follows, the prologue and opening to the game that we covered in the first episode. And we're going to start this episode by just by talking a little bit about the history and the geography. It's really pretty brief, but there's a couple things I want to cover. In Act 1 of this game, the quest is to rescue Lord Shimura from Castle Kaneda. You may remember that from the end of the last episode. So just a quick note on Castle Kaneda. It was built in 1667 AD, and it had actually been abandoned for hundreds of years by 1274 AD when this game is taking place. But in the game, it's, been upkept and is fully functional. So that's just some interesting historical context to know about it. And then, Act 1 is going to take place in the southern region of Tsushima. This game... it splits Tsushima up into 3 regions and therefore 3 acts, essentially. And so Act 1 takes place in the southern region of Tsushima, which is called Izuhara. So Izuhara is then going to have 7 prefectures where all the quests take place. And I'm just going to read them off and loosely say where they are on the map now, and I'll reference them throughout the quest and the act as we go through it. So the 7 prefectures from north to south are Hiyoshi. That's the first one. That's where Castle Kaneda is. And obviously Jin was there at the start of the prologue, ends up there after the battle at Komeda Beach. So that's in the northeast part of the island. The second prefecture is Komeda. That's in the northwest part of the island. That's obviously where Komeda Beach is, where the Mongols landed. And again, that's actually historically accurate that the Mongols would have landed on the northwestern part of the island because they were coming over from Korea and China. So just cool that the game developers thought of that. So then the next one is Ariake. That's in it's like the central eastern part of the island. Then there's Kashina and Komatsu. That's the central western part of the island. Then there's Azamo. There's a lot of quests that take place in Azamo. And that's in the southeast corner of the island. And the final part of the island is a place named Sutsu, and that's in the southwestern part of the island. So we're going to be referencing those throughout the whole time, just like, talking about where the quests are as this takes place. So, yeah, and one final thing I'll mention before we dive into the quest here, I was trying to think about how to structure this episode, and there's a bunch of different main characters and allies that you're going to be assembling throughout Act 1, and each character and ally has their own storyline. And so for the main story to progress, all you have to do for most of them is just complete like the first mission of their storyline. And you don't have to do the rest of their missions in order for the main storyline to progress. I did all their missions to completion before moving forward with the story. I thought you had to, but you don't. So for time, what we're going to do in this episode is just cover the first quest that you're required to do for Act 1 to move ahead in the main story. And then in the second episode, or the next episode of this, which will be the third episode of this podcast overall, we're just going to cover the main characters' stories, but it's not required to move Act 1 ahead. So okay, we're just going to start now and dive into the first quest you do in Act 1. It's called the Warrior's Code, and so the Warrior's Code is located in Komada Prefecture, and it kind of makes sense because Jin and Yuna left off leaving the Komada battlefield behind and escaping to, start the main story, tracking down Yuna's brother, Taka. And she tells you that Taka is a blacksmith, and that she has to rescue him. And I think that Jin also sees that Taka could be helpful for retaking the island, because he's a skilled blacksmith and could help with creation of tools and weapons and such. So, the prologue takes place in Komada Prefecture, and you then meet Yuna at a place called the Kechi Fishing Village in the Komada Prefecture, and you show up and find that she survived an assassin's attack there, and you then join her and you ride with her towards a prison camp where she thinks her brother is being held. I think she got like a tip from someone that they had taken prisoners there, and she thinks it's possible her brother might be part of them. So another thing I want to point out about this is it's kind of a very cool nighttime atmosphere for this quest as you're riding there. And with each quest in Act 1 and really throughout the whole game, there's just awesome settings and atmospheres, and I'm going to try and briefly mention each time like just what it is, so it sets the stage. And I really could spend forever just gushing over how beautiful this game is and how great the graphics are for the atmosphere and such. So it's a cool nighttime atmosphere, and it's kind of good for sneaking. So on the ride there, Yuna and Jin are talking about how important family is. Yuna says she's not sure she'll stay in Tsushima after rescuing Taka. And Jin kind of replies saying that Lord Shimura, who is his uncle, is the only family that he has. And so, he feels like he has to stay, and he feels like Tsushima is his home and he's going to fight for it. So that's kind of what he's saying there. So then eventually, you finish this ride and you kind of get to not necessarily the top of a cliff, but you're up on top of a higher hill. And this is the first time the game kind of introduces the survey, mode, I guess. And, this will pop up in some quests where it's like you can survey certain places, you scope it out before going in. So then you do that, you kind of analyze just like the front of the prison camp, the back of it. You see that the Mongols have put up some wooden fencing and everything. And so you spot out a fence opening basically towards the front because they say that it hasn't finished construction yet, and the Mongols kind of just threw it together as fast as they could. So you basically make a plan to like sneak in, through the fence. So, I really like this part. Before you move ahead, Yuna and Jin kind of have a debate about stealth tactics versus outright combat. And, previously Yuna had told Jin that she had like stolen food or supplies or something previously to get by, and Jin kind of judgmentally called her a thief, basically. And, Jin basically comes from sort of the ruling class on Tsushima as a noble, but Yuna always, Yuna told him, people do what they have to get by. I mean, it's not like we choose this because we want to. So this comes up again in this conversation. Yuna says that if they just walk in there and challenge them all outright, then it's possible that the Mongols would just kill the prisoners before they can reach them. So then Jin says, so we're going to sneak in like thieves. And Yuna says to him, that it's just them and that the samurai code exists, and that she realizes that the samurai have always followed that, but the circumstances have kind of changed here. And she says to him, you don't have to break your code, but I'm asking you to consider bending it so that, my brother and the other prisoners don't get killed by us just running in through the front gate. So eventually Jin kind of relents. And so, you sneak up in the dark, you make your way through a hole in the fence, basically. And then, they kind of are hanging out behind a rock. And then Yuna tells Jin, okay, time to go. Like, you can get this first guard cleanly, and you can sneak up behind the guard and try and stealth kill him. So I really thought this was cool, and I thought this was a good way to do it. Your first ever stealth kill in the game, it's not clean at all. Like, Jin totally screws this up. And honestly, I was kind of surprised. Like, it was, you don't just get him in one blow. It's like Jin totally messes it up, and you have to almost like pull him to the ground and stab him like a bunch of different times. And you can tell that Jin is just not really used to having to do that. And I thought that was just a cool detail to add. It just shows you that he's not used to it and that he's having to adapt. So right after this very messy, not clean stealth kill happens, a flashback begins right away. I was kind of surprised by this, actually. But so you flash back to this bear scene where it's a younger, you'd think like a teenager, Jin Sakai, and he's with Lord Shimura, and they're out in this kind of foggy field, and they're tracking a wounded bear. And apparently they say that Shimura had shot the bear with an arrow. So they're tracking it by its blood through this field. And so then the gameplay starts. You kind of just follow the blood for a bit. And then eventually you're attacked by an assassin out in this field. I got to say, I thought this was just a little bit random. Like, would an assassin be just, I don't know, just waiting in the middle of a field in the event that you walked by? But whatever. So then Shimura kind of takes this moment to teach Jin like honor and the code of the samurai as it relates to death and killing. They fend off the assassin, but he's still alive. And Shimura basically tells Jin to strike the final blow on the assassin and says, only cowards strike from the shadows, and says to him, real samurai look their warriors in the eye with courage and respect as they deliver the killing blow. And so again, it kind of just brought me back to Lord Shimura's opening speech in the prologue for everyone who watched that episode or listened to the episode here, where, it's this very noble approach to fighting the Mongols. Well, it's just a noble approach at the way the samurai conduct themselves, and Jin is finding he has to bend that code. So I thought it was just a cool, thematic concept in the game that there's like a moral struggle here for Jin. So, eventually the flashback ends, and, you get up and start to continue into the camp. And they introduce the game mechanism focused hearing, kind of similar to listen mode in The Last of Us, or other like sensory modes you can use to detect enemies. Makes me think of like some sort of thermal detection and the Arkham Knight in the Arkham games, other things like that. So focused hearing is introduced. So you sneak through the camp basically. And, you kind of, one by one, you assassinate various guards here and there. I guess you, technically speaking, don't have to, but, you can. One of the things I thought was cool sneaking through the prison camp is the Mongol hut that you can find. It looks like, almost like a hut that's been made of animal skin. And I'm pretty sure that's what it is. I'm actually, now that I'm talking about this, I'm going to do some research on what kind of skins the Mongols would make their huts on, and maybe I'll release a bonus episode for this on that. But yeah, and so it was just really well designed. You can sneak inside the hut, and there's just a lot of like Mongol trinkets and furniture and just various things that, they would have. And inside the hut, you can collect your first artifact and your first record. And the records are cool because they kind of just give you an insight into, the Mongol operations, what they're thinking, and how they do things in the game. And the artifacts are just like, little trinkets or instruments, just various things that, you can find as collectibles. So eventually you make your way through the whole camp and you free a prisoner who he tells you he left the Straw Hat Ronin, and he says he ran away because they had no food. And so he tells you that the Straw Hats were hunting the Mongols by the Sutsu prefecture, by the coast, and tells you that a blacksmith was taken prisoner to Azamo Bay, and that the Mongols had moved all the prisoners from this prison camp to Azamo Bay, but he got left behind. So Taka, obviously immediately thinks, or Yuna thinks that Taka is is the blacksmith, and that, he's in Azamo Bay. And at the same time, you hear this about the Straw Hat Ronin, and that they're fighting the Mongols. And remember, the Sutsu prefecture, that was the one in the very south, in the southwest corner of the island. So yeah, the quest kind of ends shortly after this point with Yuna saying that she has a friend in the Azamo prefecture who could help get them in to the Azamo Bay town, which the Mongols now presumably control. So yeah, this kind of wraps up the first quest. It wasn't super long. It wasn't super hard. I thought it was fun. It was a good introduction to the game. The atmosphere was cool. And yeah, one thing I just want to mention is, how they say that the Straw Hat Ronin prisoner who you freed, he says he ran away from the Straw Hats because they had no food. That's gonna come up again. And yeah, after this quest ends, you then get Yuna's quest down in Azamo, and you get the Straw Hat Ronin quest down in Sutsu. And those are going to be some of the next things you can do if you choose. So the final thing I'd mention here is that after this cutscene ends and the quest ends, you get a cutscene of Khotun Khan, and you're back at Castle Kaneda, and it shows Lord Shimura locked up, in a cage, kind of like the dungeons of the castle. And Khotun Khan is talking to him, and he's basically trying to get Lord Shimura to flip, and he's trying to get him to turn against his people, tell the island of Tsushima to surrender, join the Mongols, and help him, conquer the island. Because as of now, as far as we know in the game, again, Izuhara is the only part of the island under Mongol control. That's the southern third. So there's still two other sections of the island, the middle and the northern section. So as far as we know right now, he wants Lord Shimura's help in exchange for his freedom. And Lord Shimura, obviously being the very honorable samurai that he is, says, no way, tells Khotun Khan to kill him. And then Khotun Khan says, Jin Sakai is alive. We've heard that he survived, and my men control all the roads. We're building camps everywhere. We're going to find him. And he says to Lord Shimura, you think you've lost everything, but you haven't yet, because we'll find Jin. And so he's trying to use this against him, but obviously Lord Shimura doesn't budge. And he says, the Japanese people won't be slaves to you. And pretty courageous, I gotta say, pretty courageous moment to say this to the Mongols, especially after Lord Shimura witnessed what Khotun Khan did to Lord Adachi, the guy who, went out to battle them and had the drink thrown on him, and who got torched by Khotun Khan down on the beach. So, that just tells you, again, a lot about Lord Shimura and his resolve. So yeah, after this quest ends, you can start spending like points that you get to unlock different techniques. And yeah, I'll just take a second to say that for this first episode, we're mainly going to focus on the story and some of the gameplay. I think at a certain point, I'm going to release just a whole episode dedicated to like the different weapons that you can get, how historically accurate they are. But for now, you can start unlocking different techniques that just give you different attack options, different block options, just different ways you can fight, which is cool and just a fun part of the game. So yeah, at this point, you finish this quest, and I just want to say, after you finish this first quest, technically speaking, you don't have to do the main story quest in any specific order for the most part. you could then have your pick of the next like 3 or 4. But there is, I think, a most logical way to do it, basically just based on proximity. So, yeah, after you finish up in the Komada Prefecture, the next quest that I did and again, it just is most logical to do this one, but it's called the Tale of Sensei Ishikawa, and it's located in Hiyoshi Springs in the Hiyoshi Prefecture. So remember, Hiyoshi Prefecture is where Castle Kaneda is located. So Hiyoshi Springs is a town that's not too far from that. So it makes sense. You're still kind of operating in the general vicinity of Komada and Castle Kaneda. So you go to Hiyoshi Springs, and you start the quest by talking with a peasant. And throughout the game, like they'll give a lot of the unnamed NPCs. They're just called peasants. That's just what they name them in the game, basically. So one thing I want to mention about Hiyoshi Springs, this place was so beautiful. Oh my God. I mean, when you show up, it's truly just like a town built on top of just endless, spring pools of just crystal clear water with like steam coming off them. I mean, just so idyllic. And one funny thing, I happened to reach it by coming I was at the top of a cliff and I saw there was a spring at the bottom. And so I just jumped off the cliff down into the spring to see what would happen. And there was like an NPC, a person just like taking a bath in the spring. And I just like popped up right in front of him. And it was just kind of one of those funny video game things where, you pop up, you're just like, oh, hey. And, they obviously don't react at all. But then I was like, all right, I guess I'm here, Hiyoshi Springs. So yeah, pretty cool place. So you find this peasant, you talk to him, and eventually the peasant kind of leads you out of Hiyoshi Springs, kind of up some cliffs and towards a mountain. And you can kind of see like a house and, what they're calling a dojo up towards the top of it. It's definitely a bit removed from the rest of Hiyoshi Springs. And the peasant's telling you that this is Ishikawa's dojo. So, on the way up, you have some dialogue with the peasant, and he's telling you that Ishikawa came to town for supplies the day before the invasion. And, the peasant says that Ishikawa seemed like he was in a strange headspace, like he wasn't talking to anybody, he wasn't saying a word. And I guess typically he would. So it stood out, you don't really know what to make of that at this point. And then one of the final things the peasant says is, he says, why would Ishikawa give up his master archery position in Clan Nagao to just live in this dojo, like pretty much alone? And then Jin Sakai says to the peasant, like nobody knows. So, they're just starting to lay the breadcrumbs for the story here. So then eventually, the peasant says, okay, the dojo's up there. I'm turning back. You can find your way. And, you head on up and you get there and you go inside this first larger building of the dojo, and there's blood everywhere.
What does every USAA member have in common? Family. We're one big family who supports the military community and their eligible families. And if you, your parent, or spouse served, you could join our family and save big on auto insurance. Visit USAA.com/join today to check your eligibility. Membership eligibility and product restrictions apply and are subject to change. USAA means United Services Automobile Association and its affiliates, San Antonio, Texas.
Using a Clorox disinfecting wipe to clean that stuck-on sauce from the stove feels like...
Oh, boy. That tickles. Stop.
It feels like coming home to your needy corgi after a long day.
Best part of the day, finally.
With Clorox, clean feels carefree. Clean feels good. Use as directed.
It looks like a mess. A fight definitely took place here. And then I think this is the first time you walk around and do investigating, where it's like you look for clues and, it's not hard. You just walk around and press some buttons on the controller, and then Jin will just say, oh, like, looks like there's a struggle here. Oh, there was no struggle here. Oh, some blood or footprints going this way. So, you do some investigating, and then eventually you just follow some footprints over to like a smaller house next to the dojo. And in there, you find Ishikawa. And so then you begin a dialogue with him. And in this cutscene, you ask him to help save Shimura. You tell him that Shimura is alive. You tell him you got out of Komoda Beach alive, but, not really many other people did. And Ishikawa says that he can't help you save Lord Shimura because his student is missing, his archery student. So apparently, Ishikawa has this very skilled student in the way of the bow. And Ishikawa, as mentioned before, is apparently just one of the most famous and well-known archers on the island of Tsushima, and renowned, apparently just one of the best there ever was. And he has what he calls a super skilled student. So then eventually, you go with Ishikawa to look for his student. And on the way, you're talking to him, and he tells you that the student's name is Tomoe. And he tells you that Tomoe is a woman and that she had no clan and that she was a peasant. And Ishikawa tells you, and you find out as the player that Jin Sakai was rejected as a student of Ishikawa. And then he says that he couldn't turn Tomoe away because she was so good and that she was clearly a prodigy, and she just kept coming back and she wouldn't leave. And Ishikawa kind of felt like, that sort of talent, he just couldn't walk away from it. So you continue along a road, and then you encounter a group of Mongols. And again, you're trying to trail Tomoe, basically. So, you defeat the Mongols, Ishikawa sort of helps, and then you pick up Tomoe's trail, and, Ishikawa says that Hiyoshi Springs is going to be the next town to fall on Tsushima, and that the Mongols are spreading over the island. So eventually you follow Tomoe's trail over to, like, an abandoned little camp. You find a little campfire and just find, like, again, a couple knickknacks, a couple of supplies and stuff. And, Ishikawa and Jin Sakai fear that she's gone. And, right away they give Sensei Ishikawa this sense of, like, being a figure with a lot of wisdom. And he says to Jin, fear is a tool the Mongols will use against you. Don't let them. So, you can take that for what it is. But they're setting up the Ishikawa as like a wise older figure there. And so then Ishikawa, you walk down the road a little further, Ishikawa gifts this super nice bow to Jin. And the bow is from Lord Nagao. And so then you basically find out that the tracks lead towards a nearby fort, a Mongol fort, and it's called Fort Nakayama. And so after you're given the bow, the game gives you a tutorial for it. And, you just aim at some lamps that are posted on some stone columns, basically. And, you just learn how to use the bow. And the bow is pretty simple. It's not super hard, and just obviously a cool weapon to have. So you then arrive at Fort Nakayama, and you're kind of posted up to survey the battlefield on top of, like, again, it's not necessarily a huge cliff, but it is like a little cliff. It does give you a good vantage point. And so again, like, right away, Jin is like, okay, let's go in. And Ishikawa says, like, dude, you got to be smart here. We're totally outnumbered. They have gates. They have watchtowers. Like, we got to think of a plan here. So then, you post up, you do the survey function again, and you identify these kind of fire torches. They're more like fire buckets that are suspended. And, Jin says, like, oh, we could shoot those and then light the grass on fire nearby. You identify explosive barrels that have been very conveniently just left around on the outside of this fort. And then you see, again, very, very poorly placed hornets' nests, poorly placed for the Mongols. They're just kind of hanging around at certain spots. And so this is the first time the game sort of tells you, like, when you're planning out attacks for missions like this, these are some of the various mechanisms you can use to help you in the fights. So again, Jin wants to rush in. Ishikawa says what they should do is they should wait for an enemy patrol to leave the fort. And then when they do, they'll attack the patrol and hit it really hard. And at that point, they'll rush in. So that's obviously a pretty smart plan, just a smart way to go about it. So eventually, you wait a little bit, and then a patrol comes out, and a fight scene starts. You can go get through it however you want. You can shoot the explosive barrels, the hornet's nest, the fire torches, and you have virtually unlimited arrows too when you're like posted up in this spot. Which again, I like that. The point of games is to have fun, and it's like the first time you're doing a mission like this. So then eventually you finish up with the patrols, and then you charge into the fort with Ishikawa, and you basically clear it of all the Mongols. Again, there's a couple ways you can do this. You can technically hide until the Mongols lose you, and then you can sneak in and kind of do it stealth-wise, or you can just charge in, and just do it however you want. So I like that option in the gameplay. And then, after you clear the Mongols, you find a bunch of dead civilians, and very sad and gruesome scene here. And they've all been like shot with arrows. And then over in a different part of the fort, you find like target practice dummies. And Ishikawa says like, the arrows are very tightly clustered. Whoever shot these arrows at this target practice is a really good shot. And then he says these are definitely Tomoe's arrows, and that he knows that. So then you kind of continue around the camp, looking for clues as to where Tomoe went and what happened. So you find a scroll where Ishikawa says that he reads the scroll and says she was teaching the Mongols Ishikawa's way of the bow. And then you find a room with a woman's kimono hung up, and it's like a personal quarters sort of room. And then you realize that the Mongols freed her, and it seems to be that Tomoe is now working with the Mongols and teaching them how to be better archers. One thing I found is interesting about this is that the Mongols obviously in history are known for their innovative archery skills, and just that that's one of their most renowned traits about them and their empire. But still cool that it shows that the Mongols are smart and they're willing to adopt new tactics and take in new people who might be useful to them. So I thought that was just a cool part of the story. So at this point, a survivor kind of starts like yelling outside. You go find it. You go find the survivor, and the survivor at the camp at the fort. It tells you that Tomoe switched sides and killed everyone to join the Mongols, and the survivor is like dying on the ground basically. And after telling you this, the survivor passes away. So very sad. Very convenient for the player that the survivor lasted just long enough to give us our story clues. Thanks, game developers. So after that, I just want to say I kind of ran around the fort a lot, like trying to find the clues. But, it was fine. Eventually you find them, and that's it. So then Ishikawa actually says, as you're kind of walking out of the fort, he says he should have killed Tomoe because he pushed her too hard. And he reveals to you that Tomoe is the one who tried to kill him. And that's why his dojo was like a mess. And that's where all the blood was and everything like that. And so Jin Sakai then accuses Ishikawa of hiding something. And Ishikawa says that he never got to Komada because of Tomoe attacking him. And I guess, I don't know, going after her or figuring out what to do. And he says that she has no idea how to be a samurai. And so, Jin Sakai kind of says that Ishikawa pushed Tomoe away. I have to say, I didn't fully understand how Ishikawa pushed her away. Ishikawa said I was like hard on her. He says he was too hard on her, and eventually she tried to kill him. But as far as I know, you don't really get more than that in the game. And I don't know, that's fine for me, I guess. So and then together they kind of resolve to stop Tomoe, and Ishikawa accepts Jin's help to stop her, and they make peace. Just with that part of the story. And so then the quest ends with Ishikawa agreeing to help Jin free Lord Shimura, and then the next parts of Ishikawa's storyline, which follow Tomoe will open up that you can do. And again, we'll cover that in the next episode of this podcast. And then, Ishikawa tells you to find Masako Adachi, and that she is a renowned warrior and that she could be very helpful. So that kind of wraps up this quest, the Tale of Sensei Ishikawa. And if you remember, Adachi, that was the lord at the start of Komeda Beach, who died in the one-on-one duel with Kojun Khan. So obviously Masako Adachi is probably related to this person. And one last thing I'll mention is I love when you finish the quest, it'll take like 5 seconds and the name of the quest will pop up on the screen with some cool Japanese lettering and everything, and it'll show you standing with your horse, and it'll kind of give these random interactions with the horse as you're standing there. And one of the interactions is the horse headbutting Jin, and Jin kind of turns around and like pets it, but also says like, "Hey, what are you doing, huh?" And so it just gives it that kind of response. And I don't know, I just find that small stuff really cool and fun that they added it into the game. So at this point, the next most logical quest to do is the Tale of Lady Masako. Not just because Sensei Ishikawa just told you to do it, but Lady Masako, it's then the next closest thing on the map. So you then travel down on horseback to Ariake Prefecture, and you're going to the Adachi estate. So when you arrive at the estate, you find it ransacked with not really many signs of violence. So you look around, and then as you're like wandering from building to building, you get attacked by assassins. Then after you defeat them, Jin says the assassins weren't Mongols and they weren't bandits. So you're kind of wondering what happened, but you don't really know at this point. So one thing I just want to point out, the Ariake Prefecture and the Adachi Estate, like almost the entire thing are just the most beautiful trees with golden leaves, like golden yellow leaves that you've ever seen in your life. And again, just walking and riding around this whole section of the game, it's just so beautiful. The wind's blowing and you got these golden leaves that are just falling all around you, and it's so immersive, and it really just makes you love playing this game. I mean, there were a couple moments I like just put the controller down and just looked around and was just like, wow, this is just a beautiful game. So just want to shout that out again. So eventually, Jin is following like horse tracks out of the Adachi estate. And as he's like looking for clues, he says, there was a rider that ran away and that the rider was skilled. And then you find a dead Adachi horse on the road. And as you're, investigating it, Lady Masako kind of just pops up, and she's like right there, and she's about to shoot you. But then you say, "Hey, it's me, Jin Sakai," and she can't believe that it's you. And she says, like, "I didn't think anybody made it out of Komeda Beach," which, that's a reoccurring theme here. It sounds like the samurai, everyone thinks the samurai all got eliminated at Komeda Beach. For the most part, they did. So then you tell her that her husband died a warrior's death at Komeda Beach, and you don't say anything else. And I have to say that this was one of those moments where I was like, that was very diplomatic of Jin to do. And I guess he died upholding honor, challenging the Mongols, in a straight up fight. But yeah, not a great way that Lord Adachi went out on the beach, and maybe for the best that Jin leaves it at that. So at this point, Jin asks for her help to rescue Lord Shimura, but she says she can't help you because the clan Adachi was betrayed and they were killed by traitors, by Japanese traitors. And so, you then start to ride together, and this is gameplay. You're then riding with her, and on the way, she tells you that they were ambushed at the estate, and she stayed behind to fight while the rest of the family fled, and that she fought with a couple other members of the family. But I guess the assassins had eyes on the road, and she informs you that the entirety of Clan Adachi was massacred on the road. And so then eventually you arrived right to where you're going after this, and it's a gravesite where she kind of breaks down in tears, and she informs you that, like her sister and all of her grandchildren were killed trying to escape, and with the death of Lord Adachi at Komoda Beach, that she is the last person alive. And yeah, I just want to take a second and just talk about what an impactful story this is, just really heavy, lots of tragedy, and just shows you, the horrific impacts of war. And one thing that I just think the existence of this game is really cool. Obviously, I think a lot of people know about the Mongols, but not a lot of people know that the Mongols invaded Japan twice, actually. They twice attempted to invade Japan. And yeah, here's this small island that just got overrun, and, just really sad, things that can happen in war. So you then leave for a place called the Golden Temple. And on the ride, Lady Masako says that someone wanted to eliminate them. And she believes that this was obviously planned out a long time in advance. So you kind of get close to the Golden Temple. It is as beautiful as it sounds, just these golden trees everywhere. And at the Golden Temple, you find, she tells you to find a monk named Sogen. And she also tells you to retrieve some samurai armor that she had given to an armor or a blacksmith to fix. And she says, I think it was her husband's, and that obviously he won't need it anymore, and she wants you to have it. So, Jinsakai asks her why she isn't going to come to Golden Temple, go inside with him. And she just says, just do this for me, basically, and just leaves it at that. So that's fine. So then you walk up and you ride into Golden Temple, and it's this big open area that's kind of sheltered between cliffs. And there's a bunch of different buildings, but there's one big, I don't know, I want to say 5 to 7 story building that obviously is golden, and it looks sort of like a temple. And yeah, so eventually you ride around, and it's just a beautiful place. There's lots of refugees, and there's monks that kind of run and control the temple, and they're just providing food and shelter for the refugees from the war. And there's a lot of places to trade here, in the game, So eventually, you retrieve the armor that Masako asked you to get, and it gives you reduced damage taken. That's pretty cool for this part in the game. So you ride around, you can talk to some people. I actually think I'm going to do a short bonus episode about the Golden Temple and just do some historical research on it, and just some of the other side quests you can find there on, just a quick 15-20 minute episode summary on it. So eventually you ride around and you find Sogen, the monk that Lady Adachi told you to find. And you give him the news of what happens, and he says it's terrible and that it must have been the Mongols. And right away, and he says that right away, oh, it must have been the Mongols. It's so sad. He was standing there just sweeping a porch. Honestly, I didn't even see anything on the porch to sweep, but that's what he was doing. And he says, you ask him if he saw anything, or if he saw any armed men come through the Golden Temple or anything like that. And he just says, oh, I've been too busy. I haven't seen anything. But then he says, go tell Lady Masako that she can take refuge at the Golden Temple. So after you go back to her, you then start this quest of following Sogen. And Masako Adachi, she says to you, as you're hiding and starting to follow him out of the Golden Temple, she says that Sogen visited the estate at one point, earlier in the season, and that he arrived right at the start of autumn. And then Jinsakai says that's right when the rumors of the Mongol invasions were going to be coming. So then, you're kind of getting the sense that this monk, Sogen, is in on it and was somehow involved in what happened to Clan Adachi. And you don't know more at this point. So then you start this this quest. It's probably 5-10 minutes, where you're just following him out of the Golden Temple through the woods. And I just had to say, I just want to say, I love this game. I think this is an awesome game. And there's just some video game things that can just objectively be a little goofy And, it's just a lovable part of games. But this was one of those moments where it's like, as he's walking away, you can overhear him. He says, "Oh, I really hope nobody's following me." And then he'll like turn around really quick at random points. And like, you can be like peeking out and he might see you. And then you just have to like hide and pop your head away. And then, you just do that for like 5-10 minutes until you follow him to an assassin's camp. And this, honestly, this whole quest, it reminded me so much of Assassin's Creed. So many missions in Assassin's Creed where you're just following people and it's just kind of goofy and fun. But eventually, you get there and you and this is one of the first times in the game, at least not in the prologue, where you and Lady Masako, you just march in. And Masako is not happy, obviously. She wants vengeance, and you hear Sogen like say to them, "Oh, now they know I'm involved. You need to go handle them. You need to go kill them. Like, there's a problem." So then it's like, okay, so Sogen's definitely he's either not a very nice monk, or he's not a monk at all. And that he's definitely in on it in some way. So you just run in there, and then this was really cool. You and Lady Masako do a standoff side by side, and that's where, like, you wait until someone attacks you first, and then you hit the triangle button at just the right moment, and you one-shot kill them. And then you and Lady Masako do that side by side, and then this whole big fight scene starts. So, yeah, eventually you kill all the assassins, and you get past them in this like main courtyard area, kind of up against a cliff, and you go inside, and you find Sogen like hiding on the second floor of this just building, basically. And he says that he was only a messenger and that the world has changed and that men of vision must rise to face it and those in the way must be removed. And so he's like saying all this, and Masako is obviously super upset. She can barely contain herself. And Jin is saying we need to keep him alive to figure out who he works for, where they came from, what they want, just the whole thing. And yeah, she then just cuts him down. She literally can't keep listening to him, and she just cuts him down right then and there. And it's brutal. Obviously you can understand where she's coming from, seeing what she's just gone through. And so after that concludes, that cutscene, you walk around doing some more investigating, and you find a list with names of conspirators and some sort of a symbol that Jin Sakai isn't familiar with. So yeah, very convenient, very, very convenient for us, the players, and the story, to have a very handy-dandy list of conspirators just laying around this place. So you basically go talk to Masako Adachi about it, and she says that it's some rival clan that's moving in. And at this point, the quest ends. And again, there's more quests for Masako Adachi that open up after this, but you don't have to do them to progress Act 1. So that concludes, the Tale of Lady Masako quest there. At this point, we're about halfway through the main quest. The next one is called the Broken Blacksmith.
Hey, it's Paris. I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me, serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
This episode is brought to you by San Pellegrino Ciao, a new kind of flavored sparkling water. The kind made with real fruit juice, a pinch of Sicilian salt, and the sparkle of the Italian sun. With no added sugar and just 10 or less calories per can, enjoy. With love, from Italy. By San Pellegrino Ciao now.
And this one takes place in Azamo Prefecture. So that's the one in the furthest southwest corner of the island. So again, it's kind of just logical to follow the quest this way. You're moving down the island doing the main quest. And again, the whole time you can be stopping to roam and doing side quests. finding fox dens, lots of other little things that we're going to cover in other episodes after this. So, you then find Yuna. This is a Yuna quest. You're back to helping her with Taka and everything. You find Yuna talking to a new character named Kenji. And right away, he claims to be an upstanding merchant and a sake brewer. That's how he introduces himself. So he definitely seems boisterous and fun for everything we've seen so far in the game. It was definitely a contrast going straight from, Lady Masako, who just endured this terrible tragedy, to this, sake brewer who honestly was kind of like comic relief. I felt like I enjoyed him a lot. I could imagine some people might find him annoying or something, but I liked it. And so then the quest starts, and Kenji basically says that what they're going to try and do is smuggle Jin into Azamo Bay to rescue Taka and to get him out of there. And they're going to try and smuggle him in through a sake delivery. And so Kenji says that he's been doing business with the Mongols and that Azamo Bay is taken over by them and that someone has been working the smith, and he sees the smoke. And so again, they just figure that it's Taka. They know that he got transferred there as a prisoner, from the Komeda prefecture, and that's just what they figure. So one thing I thought was interesting is that Jin says to Kenji, "Oh, you've been doing business with the enemy." And Kenji says, "Well, I've been earning their trust and everything like that." And I just found that interesting because that sort of sentiment has popped up at many points throughout history. Just kind of like the more passive people in a conflict, and the concept of economically benefiting your enemies and people on one side getting upset by that. So again, I just thought it was realistic and cool that they included that. So then, you're walking along a road. Eventually, you get into the cart, and the sake cart, to get smuggled in, and you approach the gates of Azamo Bay, and you pretty much just get through without a hitch. One thing I just want to mention: this is another quest that takes place at night, and as you're approaching the Azamo Bay gates, just some of the coolest blue moonlight you've ever seen is just shining over the gates, and it's just really cool. I mean, if you've done the quest, you might remember exactly what I'm talking about. And if not, and you're listening to this podcast, just trust me on it. You got to play this game. You'll just see some of the coolest atmospheres you've ever seen in a video game. So then you get inside, and half the town is truly burned to the ground. And Kenji says, "Oh, someone must have made the Mongols angry, because look what they did." So I guess it's somewhat recent, like when they first conquered the town, that didn't happen. Maybe it was because people ran away or something, and they decided to burn the town to teach everyone a lesson. But you don't really know. So you get out of the cart with Yuna, and Kenji then says, "Okay, I'm gonna leave, and I'm gonna meet you at a crossroads behind the town, because if things go south and the alarm gets set off, or Taka's gone, or someone gets killed, they're gonna think that I'm the one who smuggled you in, so I'm getting out of here." So you then part ways. You and Yuna then kind of climb on top of a house, and you do another survey mode, basically, where you then identify a slaver leader of the Mongols, and you then do another follow quest. So in this case, you're following him across rooftops. You can get down at different points and follow him behind buildings and hide different places. And you just follow this slaver kind of walking through the conquered town of Azamo Bay, and you're just seeing the Mongols just guarding and, moving around. It definitely looks like a pretty sad place. And it was once beautiful and, probably thriving, and just sad to see it in this state. So eventually you follow the slaver leader through Azamo Bay, and he then encounters a peasant who says to the slaver leader that basically Taka's a terrible blacksmith and has been sabotaging them. And he says, "But I would be a better blacksmith." And then the Mongol slaver leader, he says to him, "There's only enough food for one of you." And so, okay, you'll get it, but you better be ready to get to work right away. So he's basically implying that he's going to go kill Taka like right now. So yeah, this is the way of putting the pressure on you, the player in the game. You know, it's like, uh-oh, better move quickly. You know, build some tension and suspension there. So then on your way, you can free other prisoners from cages on your way to Taka. And, you know, you just tell them, like, go hide or, like, wait until we've, like, you know, cleared the area or something. And so you free them. So then eventually you reach Taka and a cutscene starts. The gameplay ends and a cutscene starts. And the slaver is, like, walking up to kill Taka. And he seems to be almost like on the floor already, sort of helpless, like as the slaver's already gotten there. Maybe he's like weakened from starvation or something like that. And then Yuna just runs in and kills the slaver really quick and cleanly. So then at first, Taka's too scared to try and run. And he just says, everybody who tries to run gets caught and killed. Like, I don't know if we should even try. And then Jin says to him, you know, like, we need your help, and Lord Shimura is alive, and I need your help crafting a tool or some weapons to get Lord Shimura out of there. So eventually Taka agrees. You sneak out of what you could call the back of Azamo Bay, and then you see some tall grass on the left-hand side of the road that you kind of have to hide in as a Mongol patrol passes by heading towards the town. You can choose to engage them, but you can also just let them pass by, and that's fine too. So then you're basically heading now towards the crossroads where you're going to meet Kenji. So you pass by a fort in the forest. It starts to turn from like the grassy field outside of Azamo Bay into a forest where there's a fort. And you can basically just sneak past the fort and never even go inside of it if you don't want to. I'm just going to take a quick side note here and say this did not happen for me. I accidentally engaged everyone in the fort. And this turned the quest into such a nightmare because there's like 20 different Mongols or more in this fort, and you're trying to get Taka and Yuna away. Yuna's a decent fighter. Taka is not. Like, Taka is a blacksmith. And so this was, again, another one of those really funny video game things where, like, Taka would get, like, knocked down and, like, basically killed by one of the Mongols. And then he'd be what's called like downed in video games. He'd be downed, like crawling around on his knees, and he'd say, "Help me, Lord Sakai." And there were a lot of guys, so I was trying to fight them off, and I'd run over and get him up, and then he'd just get knocked down again. He'd just say, "Help me, Lord Sakai." He just kept doing this over and over again. So eventually I hit this point where I was like, all right, I really got to finish this. Clear out all these guys so I don't have to listen to this anymore. But it was funny, and it was, again, a really cool setting. The forest was awesome. The design of the fort that the Mongols erected was really cool, and you can find more artifacts and records and stuff inside the fort, and supplies and stuff. So that was really cool. And then you just like pass by the fort, get into the forest, and Kenji pulls up, and he's got like, 3 extra horses, enough for you, Yuna, Taka, and he says that the Mongols are all over his place and that they can't go there because it's not safe. So then you basically just ride away from this camp, and at this point it kind of starts to turn to morning, like this whole operation was taking place overnight, and you're riding up towards like the top of a really beautiful looking cliff or a mountain to take a rest. And as you get to the top of it, it actually gives it a name. It's called Archer's Rise. And then, yeah, it's like sunrise. The morning's coming up, and a cutscene kind of starts. And again, just so beautiful. I mean, they're just looking out over Japan as the sun's rising, and it's just so, so beautiful. And Yuna and Taka, they basically say a place called Komatsu is over the next ridge with one of the best forages on the island that they can make Jin like a tool or a weapon to help him get into Castle Kaneda with. So then the final cutscene of the quest is Yuna and Jin talking right there. And Jin says that he wants to go back to liberate all of Azamo Bay because there were more people who didn't get out. So that's the end of the quest right there. And Yuna just says, like, that's very good of you to do. Again, you don't have to do that. That turns into a side quest sort of thing. If you want to go back and liberate Azamo Bay, you can. So that's the end of that quest. And then at this point, if you look at the map, the next closest quest from there is to recruit the Straw Hat Ronin. So if you remember that from that very first quest, which was called the Warrior's Code, where you find the Straw Hat guy who's the prisoner, you then get a quest. And so it's recruit the Straw Hat Ronin, and the quest is called Blood on the Grass. So you then have to head over to the Sutsu Prefecture. And remember, this one is in the southeast corner of the island, and it's very coastal. And you're heading to a place called the Kishi Grasslands. That's apparently where you're told that the Straw Hat Ronin were hunting Mongols. So you're going to find them and try and recruit them to obviously help you free Lord Shimura. So as you're headed towards this, you are just traveling through beautiful flower fields on the coast. And it's just so gorgeous. Once again, the wind's blowing. There's just flowers everywhere, and you can just look out and see a whole ocean. And one thing I've loved about the game up to this point is that you can just look out and you just see Mongol ships, like just everywhere, on every side of the island, like sailing all around. And it really does give you this sense of like just how massive and scary the Mongol invasion must have felt in this time period. I mean, many people, might only see like boats of that size, like troop transports, only a couple times in their life, and here you've got like hundreds and thousands of them just like passing by, heading towards mainland Japan, all of it. So just a awesome, cool thing for the setting that they've added in there, and it really just immerses you in the game. So eventually, you come upon a destroyed Mongol like patrol. It's almost like a caravan, like it might have had some supplies. And you find a dead Mongol or two, and then you start following horse tracks for clues. And eventually, you get led to a forested area where it's still a bit grassy, but it's more forested. And you find like a straw hat kind of on top of a sword that's been stuck in the ground. And as you're investigating it, a Mongol like pops up to ambush you, and then you get saved by someone you know. His name is Ryuzo. And Ryuzo is a Straw Hat Ronin, and that is his hat. So apparently you've now found the Straw Hat Ronin. And then after he saves you from this Mongol, a cutscene starts of them talking. And Jin and Ryuzo know each other. And they're clearly like, they're clearly happy to see each other. And then right away, Jin says to Ryuzo, "Oh, you look like a scarecrow," basically saying he's skinny and starving. And remember, that's what the Straw Hat Ronin guy, the prisoner who you talked to, that's what he said at the very beginning of it. He said, "Oh, like I left because there was no food." So he says, look like a scarecrow. And then they kind of laugh and clap each other on the shoulders, and it seems like it's all good. So Jin then says, like, "Oh, so you're a mercenary now." And Ryuzo kind of slightly sharply corrects him a little and says, Ryuzo calls it, "Well, I'm a professional warrior." So I just thought, kind of picking up on, maybe a difference between them and their perspectives on things. But Ryuzo reveals to you that he's now the leader of the Straw Hats, because their leader died at Komada Beach. And Jin then says he didn't know that Ryuzo was there. And I think that's kind of telling. It tells you like clearly they're in different classes and they have different statuses, because they only say there were like 80 samurai at the beginning of the game at Komada Beach, and that's not that many. I mean, you could know, most people who are there, and especially if this friend of yours for a long time was there, it just says a lot that Jin didn't even know that he was there. So he then asks Ryuzo to help him rescue Lord Shimura, gives him the rundown as he's been giving all the other allies and everything. And Ryuzo says he can't help until the Straw Hats are fed. So Jin says that Shimura could get anything they need if they freed him. And Ryuzo says he'll think about it. And right at that moment, the Mongols attack. And you then have to fight off like 10 Mongols. And again, pretty cool scene. You're in the middle of this forest with tall grass. And you just go through the scene with Ryuzo on your side. And after you're done with that, you then continue on and you start on a horseback ride to the Straw Hat camp. And in the dialogue, it's revealed that Jin and Ryuzo haven't seen each other for 2 summers, and the last time they saw each other was at Lord Nagao's tournament. So Jin then says that he looked for him after the tournament was over, but that he was gone and he couldn't find him. And all Ryuzo says that the Straw Hats saw the duel and asked him to join, and it looked like fun. So, Jin then asks, there's actually 2 different dialogue options you can pick here, and the one I picked was, like, where were you at Komada, and like why he didn't know that he was at Komada Beach. And Ryuzo says that Jin was with the other samurai lords and that he was having a drink with his men. So again, it's not like, oh, screw you, Jin, but you're definitely getting a little bit of a sense of, that Ryuzo is clearly feeling like he's in a different status than Jin is, and that's coming out a little bit. So yeah, then as you continue on this ride to the Straw Hat Ronin camp, once again, just want to say, just the most beautiful pink and purple sunset I've ever seen in a video game. Like, as you're just riding through fields and stuff on the way to the camp, you just look at the sky and it's like, oh my God, I cannot believe how gorgeous this is. So just everywhere you go in this game, you find that. So then on the way, yeah, you find an empty, pillaged wagon on the road, and a peasant comes out of it saying that the Mongols attacked him and took his rice to Fort Ohira. So Jin then tells the peasant to go to the Golden Temple and take refuge, stay off the roads. And, Jin then says to Ryuzo, oh, we should go get this guy's food and, like, get it for the Straw Hat Ronin from Fort Ohira. And Ryuzo, like, reluctantly agrees, basically. And so then they eventually arrive at the Straw Hat Ronin camp. And right as they arrive, there's grumbling of like, oh, we need more food. It looks like he has no food. And like, who's this? And so Jin introduces himself, and Jin kind of, I guess, accidentally puts his foot in his mouth and says, like, there's no food, but we found out that there's food at Fort Ohira, and we're going to go get it from the Mongols. And then the Straw Hat Ronin kind of don't react well. They're all like, what? That seems dangerous. No way. And it's at this moment that Ryuzo says to you, like, hey, come in private, let's talk. And he kind of dresses you down a little and just says, like, you shouldn't have done that. You should have let me told them, like, they need to know that there's a chance and I'm their leader. And Jin just says, oh, I just thought they'd want hope and know that there's a plan. So eventually, you kind of talk it out, and it ends up being like, okay. And like the quest basically ends right about here. And I'd say that the last thing I'd mention on this is just that, like, Ryuzo says to Jin, like, we're gonna go scout out Fort Ohira. You can meet us on the cemetery, but remember who the leader of the Straw Hat Ronin is. And Jin says, like, yeah, I would never dream of replacing you, my friend. So I just thought that was interesting because, again, it's like, I don't think Jin's goal in his life is to lead a mercenary group, but it's revealing to you that clearly Ryuzo is definitely, like, at least a little bit insecure about his standing in the group, and like there's so much talk about them starving and how he feels like he needs to provide for them and everything. So yeah, I thought it was a decent quest all in all. It really wasn't that long. I kind of appreciate that about this game. And yeah, so at this point we're like more than halfway through Act 1, and the next quest is going to be called the Tale of Ryuzo. I think at this point we're going to wrap up this episode. I can't even believe how fast this goes, but it's already been more than an hour, and we will make this episode Act 1 main story part 1, and the last 3 or 4 quests of Act 1 will be in their own episode, Act 1 part 2. So just want to thank you all for listening. Again, hope you're hope you're finding this interesting and fun. I love hearing about video games, that I've enjoyed. And yeah, I will adjourn the episode here. Thank you all for listening. And remember, if you are traveling the open roads, keep an eye out for Mongolian patrols. You got to stay safe out there, everyone.